Hello everyone. Before we start, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. That's how YouTube keeps sending you stories like this. And now, let's get into it. I remember the exact smell first. It was early, still dark when I got in the car. The cold air had that wet metal smell, like the interstate was sweating from the night. I started the engine. It growled in the quiet. Streetlights were fading, the sky a dull gray blue. Saturday morning meant less cars but not empty. Just enough traffic to feel normal. I pulled onto the interstate, merged into the middle lane, and set the cruise at 70 because that's what I always did. My coffee sat in the cup holder, steam twisting up to the windshield, making tiny fog circles that kept clearing as the defroster worked. The road hummed under me, smooth, endless. I passed green exit signs I didn't need to read anymore. I knew them by heart. The lanes were wide, painted fresh not long ago, white lines clean and glowing a little under the headlights. I kept both hands on the wheel like usual. I had no music on yet. I liked the quiet before work. The world felt held together at that hour. Tires on asphalt. Engines minding their business. People headed somewhere with purpose. Then came the mirror glance. Just a habit, nothing more. I flicked my eyes to the side mirror for half a second and saw a small coupe, dark-colored, gaining on me fast. Faster than anyone should be at 7:20 in the morning. It cut through the next lane like a needle. I felt that uneasy tingle low in my stomach. Not fear yet. Just that first warning the body gives you before the brain catches up. The coupe passed me before I could even adjust my foot off the gas. When I turned my head to look, that's when I saw her. A woman in the back seat. She was young enough that life hadn't even begun to dull her features yet, but worn enough right now that desperation had taken over her face like ink spreading on paper. Her palms slammed the glass, one after the other, over and over. I could see the window shake in its frame. Her mouth was wide, voice soundless to me inside my sealed car, but I didn't need sound to know what human panic looked like. Her eyes met mine for a flash as the car nose went ahead, and in that flash I saw everything. The plea, the terror, the hope, all of it packed in less than a second. She kept banging, head jerking side to side, like she was trapped in a nightmare she hadn't agreed to be in. His hand snapped back toward her. I saw the hit, hard enough to shove her head sideways. He did it like flicking away trash. I pushed the cruise off and pressed the gas. The car protested, then obeyed. 80, 85. My coffee tipped, a little splash slapping the plastic lid. I didn't care. I pulled behind them. Her face reappeared in the gap between their seats and the rear glass. She was screaming now. I could see the cords in her neck, the strain under her skin. Every scream looked like it tore something inside her, but she didn't stop. She was screaming at me through me, like I was the only human not locked inside that car with him. He hit her again. My pulse hammered in my ears. My hands tightened on the wheel. I dialed 91 with one thumb. The speed was climbing without permission from my brain. 90-95. My voice came out steady though. That's the weird thing about danger. Sometimes the voice stays calm while the body shakes inside. My eyes never left their bumper. The dispatch line clicked, and I told them what was happening. My car drifted a bit, but I pulled it back. 100 mucks. Cars around me started noticing too. Heads turning. Some slowed. Some sped up to get away from the chaos radius forming around us. The coupe zigzagged through traffic like it was possessed by intent, not logic. I followed. Not recklessly, but desperately. There's a difference. Reckless is fast without reason. Desperate is fast because you have no choice. The next 30 miles felt like a separate life, stitched directly into my memory. The interstate bent long and lazy around hills, wide curves that normally felt easy, but at 100 mph felt like cliffs even though there were none. I moved lanes like breathing. Signal mirror lane change. Signal mirror lane change. 95. 102. I saw cars blur like sliding tiles. Wind made a high-pitched scream along my door frames, like it was warning me but also cheering me on. My brain ran scenarios without my permission. Gun, knife, him getting out, me boxed in. No way to know what he would do next. When you follow danger, you follow the unknown too. The coupe slowed and slammed the gas randomly, like it was testing if I'd back off. I didn't. My exit was still ahead but irrelevant now. Work was irrelevant. Time became distance. Distance became speed. Speed became responsibility. That was the loop. I stayed on with 911 the whole time, feeding updates in short bursts. I could feel sweat cooling on my back because the AC was blasting cold, mixing with adrenaline heat. My car shook but held. Thank God it held. Then the coupe sped off when he heard sirens in the distance. 110 for him, 103 for me. I gave chase, but physics plays favorites, and today it favored him. He cut in front of me and stopped dead in the lane. That kind of stop that doesn't think about the cars behind, doesn't think about lives, only thinks about control. His brake lights glowed red in the half-light like burning eyes. I didn't know if he had a gun or insanity or both. I swerved around him and hit the shoulder. Gravel spit under my tires like hail. I took the next exit, heart battering my ribs like it wanted out. I looped under the overpass, tires slapping the bridge seam above me, boom boom boom. Like my car had gone deaf but my body hadn't. When his car went past overhead, I punched the gas up the ramp and rejoined the interstate behind him. I stayed further back now. Just enough to be eyes, not a target. He eventually vanished ahead. My car simply could not keep his pace forever. Engines are built for limits. Humans sometimes forget they have them. But the cops were already waiting miles up the road, thanks to the 911 connection. They boxed him in with precision I could never have matched. When I finally reached them, I saw the scene like a still picture carved by urgency. The coupe stopped. 3 patrol cars angled like steel teeth around it. He was face down on the shoulder, hands zip tied behind him. Handcuffs clinked as officers pulled him up. She was out of the car, sitting on the guardrail, shoulders shaking but body intact. No blood that I could see from distance, but bruises blooming already like dark promises on her arms and cheek. Her jacket hung open, one sleeve twisted like someone had dragged her by it. Her hair was a mess, knots forming where hands had grabbed too tight. But she was alive. Alive looks different when it almost wasn't. I rolled past slowly, because the lane narrowed near the exit of their containment. My foot hovered on the brake. My hands still trembled in micro shakes, even though the danger had now been stopped by people trained to stop it. When she looked up, she saw my car. Our eyes met again, but this time not through accelerating steel. This time through aftermath. Later I learned it was his ex. He had grabbed her from somewhere hours before. No plan visible except freedom through distance and violence through possession. He had been driving with 100 rough stretches, weaving like someone trying to outrun consequence itself. The thought of what he might have been preparing to do to her sat heavy in my mind for days. Not because I could imagine every detail, but because the unknown is always heavier than the known. The ending didn't wrap neatly like stories do. It wrapped in paperwork, flashing blue lights, ambulance checks, and reports. I didn't get medals. Didn't get interviews. I got a drive to work the next week on the same interstate, knowing that one pair of hands banging on glass had changed the direction of my life and hers. He went to jail. She went to safety. I went to work late that Saturday, pulled over once my shaking finally slowed enough for the wheel to feel like an object again. Not a lifeline. I wiped the spilled coffee. The stain stayed faintly on the plastic trim for months. A reminder that speed isn't always running toward something. Sometimes it's running for someone. That morning was the scariest highway I ever took because it was real. Real danger. Real human screaming. Real choice. Real risk. And a real ending where lives continued after the worst almost happened. I kept taking that drive. Every Saturday if needed. But I never looked at a side mirror the same way again. The road stayed the same. I changed. And that was the clearest ending life could give. I was driving east on the interstate at 10 at night, the kind of Saturday where the world feels half asleep. It was 10 in late fall, so it was already full black outside, cold, quiet, and empty enough that you could forget other people even existed. The stretch of highway between my town and the next city over was dead flat, the land around it just fields and windbreaks. Nothing interesting. Just corn stubs from summer harvest poking out of frozen soil, thin trees lined up in rows like fences, and grain silos sitting far apart like forgotten waypoints. If you've ever driven the Midwest this late, you know the silence has a weight. The whole place turns into one big dark ocean, and the interstate is the only thing moving through it. My car was an old sedan, silver paint chipped from winters and road salt. The heater worked, but it made dry, dusty air that scratched my lungs if I ran it too high. I kept it on low, enough to keep the windows clear but not fog them up. The radio signal out here was spotty, only static most of the time, so I had music playing from my phone through an aux cable. Nothing loud. Just anything to fill the space. The pavement hummed under the tires like a constant low note. The speed limit was 70, but my car liked 68 better, so that's where I kept it. Cruise control locked. Foot barely resting on the gas out of habit. One hand on the wheel, the other sometimes tapping the center console like a nervous tick. I wasn't nervous then. Not yet. It was more like muscle memory for long drives. The sky above me was the clearest thing all day. No clouds, no rain, no moon either. Just stars smeared like someone flicked white paint across a warehouse ceiling. There were moments you could almost see the shape of the Milky Way, thin and milky, running overhead like a seam down the center of creation. Out here, you don't get city glow ruining the view. But that means when something bright shows up, it grabs your eyes even if you're not looking at it directly. That's what happened first. A flash of green, white fire in the corner of my vision, there and gone, like someone struck a welding arc far away. My brain instantly tried to downplay it. Probably a firework left over from summer, someone lighting one in a field for fun, the kind kids buy off reservation towns or roadside tents. But it was October, and it was 10:30 p.m. No one was setting off fireworks now. Still, the brain likes easy answers, especially when the real one is too big to accept right away. 3 cars were ahead of me in a loose pack, maybe 15 to 20 seconds of distance between each. All their taillights were red dots in a long straight line, same pace, same direction, like we were all part of a late-night conveyor belt. The closest exit was 12 miles away. No streetlights, no gas stations, no shoulders lit up, just dark on both sides, the yellow lane lines rolling past like dashed Morse code. The road was dry but gritty, flecked with dust, sand, and tiny bits of gravel left over from last week's early snow. Every once in a while you'd hear a pebble snap against the undercarriage, like a fingernail flicking metal from below. I adjusted the wheel a little, correcting for a gentle drift that didn't even register before. My throat felt dry, so I took a sip from a half-empty water bottle in the cup holder. The plastic clicked against my teeth in the quiet. I swallowed. The hum of the interstate resumed. But the sky snapped again, brighter this time, like a flare being dragged across the edge of vision. That was when I finally looked up. I saw it. A green ball of light, screaming across the sky, dropping at an angle that defied anything that should be above a highway at night. It wasn't a firework. It was too fast, too smooth, too huge. The color wasn't yellow, orange, or white like fireworks or plane lights. It was green. A shimmering, violent emerald green, the kind you see in copper burns, chemical reactions, or electrical explosions. But this was in the sky. High above me, yet large enough that it filled a chunk of the horizon like a comet dragging paint across a canvas. The green flicker had a core that was almost white, and around it was a halo that sputtered like metal evaporating in heat. Behind it trailed sparks like molten dust, stretching longer than any meteor I'd ever seen in photos or videos. It was silent at first because it was too far away. Then it started to grow, a faint hiss, not loud, but the kind you feel more than hear. A distant whisper, like sand hitting glass, stretched to infinity. My heart spiked so fast I actually felt a cold pulse in my ears. A single thought hammered through me: I hope I don't die right now. Not from a warhead. Not from this falling star. Not here on a Saturday, in an old silver sedan, surrounded by cornfields. It kept going, dropping, falling, cutting across the sky like a signal flare for something catastrophic. I'd always thought meteors were quick, blink and miss, but this one dragged across the sky so long it felt like the sky itself was falling with it. Maybe it was 6 seconds, maybe 8, maybe 10. But fear stretches time like rubber. Long enough to hope, long enough to brace, long enough to imagine impact, shockwaves, firestorms, the end of the state, the end of me. Long enough to feel small. The green ball shivered brighter and dimmer as it fell, like the atmosphere was tearing pieces off it. The sparks fizzled outward in long glowing lines. It was beautiful in a horrible way. The kind of sight that should be watched from a planetarium, not through a windshield while going 68 mph. My peripheral vision filled with afterimages every time it flared. My brain kept trying to pull emergency alarms: radiation, war, impact, explosion. Your body prepares for death even before logic catches up. My muscles locked up. Shoulders tight. Jaw clenched. Breath shallow, quiet, timid. Like noise could make the sky punish me faster. That was when the first car ahead of me pulled over. The motion jolted me back into my lane, a fast flick of their turn signal, then the car cut across onto the shoulder like a swimmer diving to the edge of a pool. Then the second car, then the third, all pulling over. Smooth, calm, almost synchronized. For a brief second I thought something else was happening on the road. An accident, a deer, a cop. But it was the sky they were reacting to. It had to be. I tapped my brake and eased onto the shoulder too, gravel crunching under my tires like dry cereal. The shoulder was a wide lane of rock shards and earth dust. It smelled faintly of mud and ice when I rolled the window down a crack. I didn't even remember deciding. It was instinct, a survival reflex older than language. When the sky falls, you stop moving. I parked about 50 feet short of the closest car ahead of me. Their brake lights were still glowing red, static, eerie, like campfire embers in the dark. I sat still for a moment, hands numbed by adrenaline, yet weirdly hot inside. My chest was tight like someone cinched it from the inside. My throat felt like it had shrunk an inch. I stared at the sky through the windshield. The green fireball was still falling, still blazing, still ripping through space. Then, finally, it changed. It grew brighter still. One last violent bloom of green light that washed over the horizon like a silent flash grenade. Then it split. Not like an explosion outward, but like something turning itself inside out. It fragmented, sparks bursting in every direction for a millisecond. Then everything dimmed, like a candle being pinched between invisible fingers. The green light elongated, fizzled, thinned, then was gone. No sound, no explosion, just absence. The static silence felt louder than any noise could have been. I exhaled slowly, a long-plated breath that finally broke out of hiding. That was when I noticed the other cars. Pulled over, doors open, faces angled upward. People standing half outside their cars, jackets zipped, hands in pockets, shoulders hunched from cold. No one spoke, but no one needed to. The sky had done all the talking. Seeing other people out of their cars, staring where I had stared, made it real in a way memory alone could not. It wasn't imagination. It had witnesses. It had receipts. It had weight. My body began to shake a little, micro tremors rattling through my legs like aftershocks. I turned the car back on and let the heater run a bit stronger this time. The vents exhaled warm, dry air. The clock on the dash said 10:33. Barely 3 minutes had passed. It felt like a chapter of my life had cracked open and closed again in that sliver of time. I eased back onto the lane after a while. Slow, careful, conscious now of how fragile a car looks when the sky is capable of burning copper a state away. The interstate felt narrower, like I was driving between margins. The yellow lines now felt like warnings painted by someone who knew more than drivers ever should. My eyes scanned the road more actively, checking for deer shapes, tire blowouts, loose cargo, blinking hazards. Everything harmless now felt like it had teeth before context returned to the world. The sky was black again, deep navy, stars still in place, like nothing had happened up there at all. The sky is great at lying. I learned later the meteor landed in Minnesota, a full state away. Not a bomb, not a warhead, just space metal burning green because of copper, seen by people across 3 states. Headlines called it a meteor. Experts said it was likely copper compounds burning as it passed through the atmosphere. No one died. No one was hurt. But I did not know that then, parked on the shoulder, jacketed faces staring upward with me, silent agreement that the worst almost happened. The truth afterward did not dull the memory. It just framed it. By the time I got home, my body had calmed enough to let logic steer again. I sat in my driveway for a few minutes before killing the engine. Not because I couldn't move, but because I needed the moment to close properly. I stared at the dark road behind me in my mind, the green ball tracing itself across the sky, and the red brake lights of strangers giving me confirmation that my eyes hadn't lied. The ending was good because no one died, but it was also good because I stopped pretending the world was small. The Midwest is flat, quiet, and safe most nights. But not all of them. Sometimes the sky reminds you that survival is luck riding shotgun with instinct. I went to bed later, throat dry, chest light once more. The image of green fire still lingering, like a bruise in the night I lived through, and the knowledge that it burned itself out before it hit anything worth losing. Luck remains the quietest part of the story, but the most important one. I still remember the night like it was yesterday, even though it was a decade and a half ago. It happened in central Washington, on one of those empty roads most people don't even think about. The kind that stretches for miles without lights, without signs of life, without another car in sight. The road that curves around the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. Even saying the words now makes me feel that same pit in my stomach. Not because Hanford is haunted, but because it just feels wrong at night. It always has. A huge, sealed-off place that once made nuclear weapons. Fences for miles, warning signs about radiation. Security checkpoints in the distance that you're not supposed to go near. During the day, it just looks like dry land, yellow grass, big skies, and endless nothing. But at 10 at night, it feels like you're driving along the edge of the world. Somewhere humans were never meant to build anything, let alone something that could poison the earth. I was behind the wheel of my old SUV. It was late, but not too late. The air smelled like dust and cold metal. Not like normal desert dust. It had that sharp smell. The same smell you get when rain hits hot iron, even though it hadn't rained for weeks. The tires hummed steadily, that low drone sound rubber makes on old pavement. The stereo was off. The windows were shut, but I could still feel the pressure of the outside night, like it was squeezing against the car. I wasn't alone. 3 of my friends were with me, all crammed inside, half tired, half alert, staring out at the darkness without talking much. Long drives do that to you. You start listening to things you normally ignore. The engine, your breathing, the way the wind pushes the car a little when you pass open land. The rattle in the back door that my SUV always had, and I kept promising I'd fix but never did. That night, every little noise felt 10 times louder. We hit a long, steep hill, the kind that forces the car to work harder. The engine shifted lower, dragging its way up. The headlights shone up the incline like 2 pale knives cutting through shadow. The hill didn't have street lights. It didn't need them. No one traveled there enough for that kind of care. My foot pressed a little harder on the gas. The transmission groaned in response, steady but thick. That's when I saw it. A slow, dark shape ahead in my lane, moving uphill at a snail's pace. At first, my brain didn't even try to label it. It just registered it as something too slow, too small, too strange to belong there. The shape was no bigger than a large doghouse, maybe a little taller. Boxy. Covered. With wheels that looked carved out of another century. I eased off the gas. The car slowed, but the engine kept pulling hard because of the slope. The headlights crawled up the back of the thing. Wood. Canvas. Small metal bolts along the frame. And then movement. Dogs. Too many dogs. I leaned forward without realizing. My hands tightened on the wheel. My heart was doing this heavy drum thing in my chest. Not fast, just big, like someone pounding from inside. The headlights finally showed them clearly. Border collies. Black and white coats, thick with outdoor grime. Not fat, not sick. Strong dogs. Working dogs. At least a dozen of them. Could have been more. Maybe 15, maybe 18. It was hard to count them because they moved like a single mass. Their paws kicked up dust even on pavement. Their breathing puffed out like little clouds, because the air was cold. Leashes or rope harnesses connected them all to a tiny covered wagon. The driver sat on a small wooden bench at the front. A man, thin shoulders, a long tangled beard, gray and black, hanging almost to his chest. He wore a heavy coat that looked patched together from pieces of different coats. It was torn in places and stitched in others with thick thread. His face was rough like dried clay. Deep lines. Windburn, red around the nose. His hands held the reins or ropes loosely. More like a man holding on out of habit than control. The dogs were pulling the wagon uphill like it was nothing. Their heads were low, necks strong, steps in perfect sync like they had trained for it their whole lives. Their hackles weren't raised, they weren't barking. That made it worse. Silence from a dozen working dogs at night felt unnatural. A pack that big should make noise. Panting, whining. Something. But there was nothing except the tapping of their paws and the low creak of the wagon's wheels. I changed lanes a little but stayed behind them. Not because I wanted to tail them, but because my brain was stuck in that slow motion place where it refuses to believe what it sees. My friends were now fully awake. One of them leaned toward the windshield. The other had half turned in his seat. The third was frozen with both hands, gripping the side of his door like he was holding himself up. The road there is cracked and old. Hanford routes don't get smooth pavement. The slope made every part of that scene feel heavier. The air was dry, but the dust rising around those dogs made it look smoky, almost like fog. Even though there was no fog. Their eyes didn't glow like in movies, but they reflected the headlights like tiny marbles when their heads turned slightly. Not toward us. Just small glances to keep balance. The wagon itself was a small, covered thing. The canvas pulling back into a peak shape at the top like old pioneer wagons. Tiny window slats cut into the side, covered from inside. No light leaked out. The wood looked hand-cut. Not machine-cut, real wood, sanded smooth from time. The wheels had metal rims that tapped faintly whenever the cracks hit them. Tap, tap. Not loud but sharp. I felt a chill ripple down my back, the kind that begins at your shoulders and spreads slowly like cold ink. My mouth was dry. Not thirsty dry, fear dry. The kind that makes swallowing feel like paper sliding against itself. We crept uphill behind them for maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Time didn't flow right there, it stretched. My brain kept asking the same useless questions. Why are there dogs pulling a wagon here? Who lives like that? How did no one see this on the news? Did this guy hike them out here from somewhere? Is something hidden inside that wagon? Not ghosts, not monsters, just human possibilities that were scarier. People living off-grid is one thing. This was something else. This felt like a system built for survival secrecy, or stubbornness. My speed dropped to maybe 20 miles an hour. The engine felt loud next to their silence. My headlights shook a little as the SUV climbed. The dogs didn't slow. Their muscles worked under their coats in perfect unison. Their harness ropes were thick, hand-braided. dust-stained, like they had been used for years without being replaced. The wagon's frame had small little details nailed into it. A loop here, a metal latch there, a coiled extra rope hanging off the back, a lantern hook at the front, but the lantern was missing. I pulled farther left, guessing I might have to pass soon. The road didn't have much width. I felt anxious. Not brave, anxious. The driver didn't look back once. Not even a twitch of curiosity. That creeped me out more than anything supernatural ever could. A man driving a covered wagon, pulled by a football team of border collies in total silence at night, going uphill around a nuclear dump site, and not caring about the car behind him. That said, either he had seen everything, or he expected nothing. I passed them slowly, giving them space. My headlights swung over them like a spotlight. The dog's paws tapped peacefully. The wagon creaked quietly, and the driver just sat there, head slightly bowed like a man listening to something distant that we couldn't hear. I exhaled only once we cleared past them. My friends didn't speak, but I felt the air in the car shift, like 3 held breaths finally released. We reached the top of the hill in silence. The road leveled out again. My speed climbed to 30, 40, 50. I glanced into the rearview mirror, fully expecting the road behind me to be empty again, or the wagon to be shrinking into the dark. But they were gone. No dogs, no wagon, no driver, no dust trail, no slow-moving bump sound. Nothing, just empty dark road glowing under our headlights as we drove forward. My stomach twisted, but not in that supernatural movie way. In that real, world way where your brain realizes something was there one moment, and physically impossible to disappear the next. No side roads up the hill, no turn-offs, no ranch entrance, no headlights from other cars, no dog yips echoing, no brakes, no rattling, no human footsteps when we passed. It was like driving past a completely silent parade float that evaporated when you blinked. I slowed the car a little again out of instinct, like maybe physics would reset itself and they'd reappear. But the universe didn't fix that moment. The road stayed empty. I felt uneasy the rest of the drive. Because if a guy like that existed, someone who moved silently through nuclear backroads at night, using only dogs and a homemade covered wagon, then there were types of lives, motives, and worlds hidden inside this country that none of us would ever see, explain, or understand. And that was scarier than anything fictional ever could be. Years later, I figured out what I had seen. Entire communities around central Washington train working dogs on massive team loads. Border collies are built for long-distance herding, pulling, and coordinated movement. The man wasn't a ghost. He was real. He was likely someone living deep off grid near old farmland or herder land adjacent to reservation routes. The roads at Hanford curve for miles, but visibility tricks your brain because incline hides distance. From the top of the hill, the curve likely masked his turn or descent path. The silence wasn't eerie because it was paranormal. It was eerie because those dogs were trained professionals, doing what they had done 1,000 times. I still don't know who the man was, where he came from, or what he carried inside that tiny covered wagon. But I know this: it was real. It terrified me for reasons that made sense only later, and the fact that 4 witnesses saw it, and still questioned their own brains, tells you everything you need to know about the power of an empty highway at night. Some moments don't need ghosts to haunt you. They only need the unknown and the dark. I was tired, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and makes the road feel longer than it actually is. My shift at the warehouse had run late again. Nothing unusual, just trucks, forklifts, metal crates, repeating sounds, heavy air that smelled like diesel and cold concrete. When I finally clocked out, the parking lot lights were buzzing faintly, that electric hum street lamps make when it's silent. My car was the only one left in my row. Frost had formed at the edges of the windshield, thin silver lines on the glass. I sat there for a minute just letting the heater run, hands wrapped around the steering wheel, knuckles stiff from cold. The radio stayed off, mostly because I couldn't handle noise anymore. My drive home was always a straight shot on an old highway that cut through thick forests and open fields. Hardly any cars at that hour, mostly semis moving freight between states. It was around 1 in the morning when I finally pulled onto the road. The asphalt looked blacker than usual, like the night had soaked deeper into it. Reflectors on the lanes glowed every few seconds as my headlights skimmed over them, little blinking sparks guiding my path. Tall pine trees lined both sides like a tunnel that kept on going forever. Their shadows moved almost like they were breathing when the light hit them. My tires made that steady rolling sound, stretching out with the emptiness around me. A few minutes in, I saw the semi. It was a big one double trailer, hauling something heavy, because it was slow to climb the long county road slope ahead of it. Its red tail lights looked dull through the thin morning mist that normally hung low in this region. I had passed dozens of these trucks on this road, but tonight it felt like the only other thing alive on Earth. Its metal body blocked the middle lane slightly, so I signaled, more out of habit than need. The indicator blinked orange against the darkness of the forest. Then came the fog. At first, it looked like normal ground fog, the kind that rolls in without warning near the riverbeds and low wetlands, soft and white, drifting gently like smoke. But within seconds it became thicker, denser, a sudden wave rather than a slow creep. It swallowed the semi's back half first, then the trees, then the road itself. The world shrank, blurred. My headlights didn't cut through it. The beams hit a wall of white and bounced right back like the fog was solid. It felt too fast, too heavy, like it dropped rather than arrived. I eased my foot off the gas. The semi ahead stayed at the same speed, unaware of how small it was becoming inside that fog bank. My car entered the mist after it, and at that exact moment the first droplets hit. Small taps at first, like rain starting. One, then two, then several specks striking the hood and windshield. But they weren't water sounds. Water smacks softly. These were thick, heavier taps. I waited for the wipers to smear the glass clear, but instead, I watched red streaks appear. Dark ones, sticky, wet but not thin blood. Not a hallucination. Not my imagination filling the blanks. I could see it. Even through the fog, even with my tired, burning eyes, it was obvious. The droplets hit the metal and turned into tiny red beads, rolling slowly down from the top edge of my windshield, dragged by gravity like little crawling insects. The smell entered right after. A sharp iron smell, the kind you only smell when blood is warm enough to vaporize into air. Metallic, thick, almost sweet if you breathe in by accident. My heart kicked once hard. Adrenaline shoved the tiredness right out of me like someone pulled a plug. I gripped the wheel tighter, slowing even more. My brain tried to give me explanations. Maybe the truck hit something on an incline. Maybe an animal burst. Maybe the road carried the smell forward. Maybe. But none explained the fog itself carrying blood in midair, splattering down like rain. Then fur hit. Soft clumps of it smacked the hood. Brown and pale at the edges. Some pieces were light, almost white near the base, thick winter deer fur that looked like it had been yanked rather than shed. I remember one piece sliding across the glass, twirling lazily like a feather in a draft before sticking to the corner of my side mirror. The mirror shook slightly from each hit, even though the droplets should not have weighed much if it was water. Then came the heavier chunks, guts. Not full organs, not yet, just bits. Pink and dark red pieces flying back from the truck like raw meat fed through a grinder. They hit the bumper, the roof, everywhere. Then something long and wet slapped my front grille with a heavy thud. I didn't know what part it was, but it was ropey thick. My stomach twisted even though I hadn't eaten anything since lunch. The fog was so thick I could only see a few feet ahead, but I could hear it clearly, every wet smack, every sliding, sticky drag down my car's metal body, bits of meat hitting and then slowly drooping downward like melting clay. I tried to breathe through my mouth, but the smell was already everywhere. Hot blood vapor mixing with early winter fog moisture, turning the air heavier and almost choking. I had to pass the truck. I knew sitting behind it meant getting more of whatever it had hit. I flicked my signal again, lights blinking through a world that now looked like it was dissolving. The moment I pulled into the passing lane, the real rain came. Flesh. Big splashes of it slammed across the hood and windshield like someone throwing buckets of raw meat. I still remember the sound of one piece hitting the roof, a wet hollow slam that made the inside of my car thrum like a drum skin. Another large chunk hit the hood and burst on contact, spreading red and pink outward like a cracked egg, hurling liquid everywhere. My wipers smeared it in thick arcs instead of clearing anything. Red bow shapes layered over other red shapes, building patterns that were not patterns at all, just carnage sketched by momentum and impact. I remember the headlights catching one piece in midair. It was bigger than the rest, flapping slightly from wind resistance. It slapped the windshield and slid slowly down like taffy until it hung over the hood edge and finally tore apart, leaving thick, smearing lines. There was a second, a small blink of time, when I saw the cause. A deer had exploded, not gracefully broken down like nature usually handles death. This was violent physics. The semi ahead had slammed into it at speed before I ever came up on the hill, a full-grown buck or maybe a large doe. Its body had burst from impact, turned into aerosol and shrapnel. The fog picked up the spray, carrying it like a mist cannon of biological debris. The truck didn't just hit the deer, it atomized the deer. Its metal grill probably crushed bone and tissue so hard the carcass burst backward into a storm. It was easy to realize after seeing the size of the chunks hitting me. No small side swipe could rain meat like that. That impact was a battering ram of a moment. The deer probably didn't even have time to feel it. I passed the semi slowly, keeping distance. Its grill was dented inward, blood smeared across its chrome face, streaking back toward me into the fog that now looked like it breathed red instead of white. Bits were flinging from the sides still, caught in turbulence and wake, smacking my car as I overtook it. The driver never saw me. His cabin sat high, his focus forward, probably steady on the long drive, unaware that his moment had turned into a storm battery for the world behind him. Once past the truck, the fog stayed thick for miles. I crawled through it slower, eyes glued ahead, seat belt tight across my chest, listening to debris still hit and slide even though the semi was now behind me. Some pieces just hung in the air, carried by wind and mist density, slapping unpredictably like nature had rigged the air into a meat cloud. I pulled over at the first safe cutout. There was a metal emergency bay probably meant for broken cars or checking tires. The fog wrapped around me still. When I stepped out, the cold air punched me in the lungs, but it also brought the smell clearer now that I wasn't moving. Blood sprayed the sides of my car. Thick strips dangled from the bumper like someone glued meat ribbons to it. Fur was stuck in the wiper joints, mirror frames, antenna base. Pink bits were lodged in the front grille holes. Some pieces hung loose, trembling faintly, like jello hooked on a wire fence when you poke it. My shoes made little suction sounds when I stepped, because the ground had gathered mist and blood-mixed drizzle. The fog slowly thinned after a few minutes. The droplets stopped hitting. Pine tree silhouettes sharpened again. The air got colder, crisp. I wiped the side mirror with a tissue from my glove box, the tissue turning red fast, soaking so deeply the fibers tore. I sat back inside the car, but didn't close the door yet. I needed outside air mixing through to make breathing possible again. My hands shook once, then steadied. I checked the clock. 1:17 a.m. That meant the carnage battery that hit me lasted less than 5 minutes. But those minutes stretched into hours inside my head. I got back on the road slowly, fog now mild and normal behind me, nature pretending again that it was just ordinary mist. The semi was gone by the time I reached the next straightaway. The forest returned to its normal silent size. My car, though, looked like evidence that something brutal had happened, like a crime scene test that no detective had asked for. The whole drive home I kept my eyes forward, body alert, coasting. The red bits on my hood shivered slightly in the cold wind, frozen soft chunks rattling faint taps as the air dragged them. When I finally reached home, the street was empty and silent again. My porch light glowed warm yellow against the cold night. I parked but didn't get out immediately. I looked at my car in the drive, red smearing across its face, bits of deer like confetti from the worst parade nature ever threw at me. In the morning, I hosed the car down. Meat chunks dropped off in soft plops on the driveway concrete. Fur washed into the gutter and clumped near the drain. The water ran red at first, then pink, then finally clear. It took almost an hour to feel clean again even after the car looked clean. I kept thinking about the deer though, not in a tragic emotional way. More like recognizing how fast highway moments can turn violent without warning, and how the world behind an impact carries the story longer than the thing that caused it. The ending was simple. I filed a damage claim later that week for the chips in my paint, and the dent from the heavier piece that hit my roof. The claim adjuster blamed loose cargo turbulence behind a truck. I never corrected him, explaining that I drove through a rain of blood, fur, and guts from a deer vaporized by a semi was not something a normal file box is built to hold. I still drive that road sometimes, but every time I see fog at night, I instinctively tense, bracing for rain that should never be rain again. The world doesn't need ghosts to feel terrifying. Sometimes physics and bad timing write enough horror on their own. The night didn't change the highway, but it changed me permanently, in a way that ended clearly, quietly, without fantasy, just hard truth stuck like dried blood on cold metal. It was still half dark when we got into the car. The clock on the dash told me 5:42 a.m., and that felt right. The sun was not up yet, but you could see a faint orange touch behind the mountain tops. It was one of those early mornings where the sky looks clean, the air looks sharp, and everything feels quiet, like the world has not fully powered on yet. The highway cut through a long mountain valley with tall rock walls on one side and thick pine forests on the other. The road bent left and right again and again, like someone tried to draw a snake using asphalt. We were driving in an old silver sedan. The heater hummed softly because the morning cold was still hanging in the shadows. My hands were warm from the steering wheel, but the outside world looked cold enough to snap. The mountains here had personality. Big hills, sharp corners, slow curves, sudden blind spots. There were reflective road signs on the edges, small metal arrows telling you where the road was going next. Some signs were slightly bent from old storms, rocks, or maybe from someone losing control too close to them. The highway itself was smooth in parts but cracked in others. Thin lines of old repairs ran along the edges like scars. Every curve felt like an entrance into another smaller world, another pocket of silence, another blind stage where anything could happen. The radio was off. The only sound was the car engine, the tires pressing against the road, and little random noises like air hitting the side mirrors, or the occasional rock tapping under the car frame. I remember feeling so calm that it almost felt wrong. No trucks, no morning traffic, no hikers crossing the shoulder, no lights from gas stations, not even a single bicyclist. I had driven highways at night many times, but this was different. Night feels scary because it is dark. This felt scary because it was empty. You expect emptiness in deserts, in open plains, or in abandoned towns. You do not expect it on a fully built highway. The kind that has painted lane markers, metal guard rails, emergency turn bays, signs for exits that stretch only further into the wild. The kind of emptiness that feels like a warning without words. I blinked once and looked into the rear view mirror. It was a quick glance, the kind you do out of habit. What I saw did not fit into my brain at first. Far behind us was a pair of headlights. Small, low, white beams. Normal so far, but the way they were moving was wrong. They were not creeping toward us like a regular early morning car. They were lunging toward us like something out of control. It was too far to tell exactly how fast, but fast enough that it made my arms stiff. It looked like the car was eating the distance between us in giant bites. I told my friend to pay attention because the car behind us was flying toward our lane without switching to pass. The speed difference was monstrous. We were doing 90 km/h, a normal fast speed for those curves. But this car looked like it was launching missiles at the bends instead of tires. The road ahead curved again. A sharp left followed by a short straight dash, then a winding right. The headlights behind us grew bigger by the second. I checked the speedometer and pushed a little more, 95, then 98. The car still closed in like gravity was pulling it. The guard rails on the right side were thick metal beams, cold and silver, leading toward a very deep ditch. That ditch was not just a drop. It was a canyon-like pit, at least 12 to 15 feet deep. From where we were sitting, it looked like a mouth ready to swallow anyone who drifted too close. Trees clung to the far edge of it, tall pines, old trunks, branches stretching toward each other like hands trying to reconnect over a gap. A thin layer of morning mist sat at the bottom, making it hard to see exactly how brutal the landing would be for a car that kissed the edge. The car was now close enough that I could see its shape. It was dark-colored, maybe black or very deep blue. There were no other cars to make comparisons, no shadows except mountain shadows, so it was hard to tell exactly. The lane markers were bright enough to see from the headlights, long broken white lines showing that it was a passing zone. The car behind did not care. It stayed locked onto our lane like it was tunneled into our trunk. My heart was doing a slow drumbeat in my ears. Not fast, but heavy. My brain was doing math I did not ask for. If it does not switch lane, it hits us. If it loses control, it flips. If we switch lane, we might hit the rail ourselves. The car was maybe 80 meters away, 70, 60, then 40. This was not a chase, this was physics abuse. My friend swerved slightly toward the right to give the car behind extra space, almost hugging the line that warned of gravel and ditch. But instead of passing us cleanly, the driver behind made a survival decision we did not expect. At the very last second, the car jerked hard toward the ditch. It was not a smooth drift. It was a violent decision, like someone grabbed the steering wheel and yanked it away from a crash. The tires screamed, a brutal metal grinding shriek that sliced through the silent valley. The car went down the ditch nose first. I expected a flip, a crash, a fire maybe, a body flying maybe, something that would make sense. What happened instead made us feel like we were glitching out of reality. The ditch was deep enough that the first part of the car went totally out of view. Just headlights sliding into the misty grave. But the momentum did not die. It used the ditch like a ramp. Instead of burying the car, it launched it. The front bumper hit the opposite side of the ditch and the car shot up into the air, 4 to 5 feet above the highway surface, still doing around 100 km/h. The undercarriage was exposed for a moment. Metal frame suspension arms shaking, pieces of mud, little rocks, clumps of grass falling like confetti from a disaster piñata. The car landed on all 4 tires hard, but stable. The tires kissed the highway again like claws finding ground. There was smoke from the tire friction, light gray smoke trails following the impact and then thinning out quickly, leaving lazy snake lines behind. The suspension bounced once, twice like an animal shaking off water. There was no stop, no hesitation, no breakdown. The driver reacted with pure instinct. Within 1 second of landing, the car accelerated forward, 1 ton to 120, 130, 140. The gap between us went from dangerous close to unreachable in seconds. We were watching a man or woman who had almost died but chosen to sprint away from the moment instead. It did not look heroic. It looked like someone escaping shame, fear, shock, or maybe their own heartbeat. The valley absorbed the noise again, silence reclaiming its territory. The echoes of the tire shriek died against rock walls miles away. My brain felt like it was swimming slow. My arms were cold again even though the heater was running. The air smelled like rubber smoke and mountain pine. That smell sat in the car for minutes, a weird cocktail of danger residue. I kept driving. My eyes felt wide without blinking. The road ahead was still twisting, still bending like a puzzle built to test your luck. But it no longer looked the same. The emptiness felt heavier now, like the valley said, "See, it can happen." My foot stayed steady on the gas but did not push harder. There was no need. We did not want to catch the driver. We did not want to know more. We did not want to see their face. The human brain is curious, but survival curiosity is different. Sometimes your brain tells your heart to shut curiosity down and drive home alive. At around 6:15 a.m., we passed an emergency gravel bay, a small pull-out zone for broken-down cars. But there was no broken-down car in it. No person standing there confused. No bumper lying like evidence. We passed more guardrails, more pines, more reflective curve signs. Every single one looked clean and untouched. No sign that a car had launched out of a ditch like a failed suicide attempt turned stunt. It made the moment feel even stranger. If a tree falls in a forest and nobody is there, does it make a sound? We were there, it made a sound, but the world looked like it chose not to mark it. By 7:40 a.m. the sky was properly blue. Birds were waking up above the tree line. You could see the tops of the mountains clearly now, tall, calm, still dangerous, looking but honest about it. The sun was warming the valley. The air no longer looked sharp. It looked normal again, like a place where nothing weird ever takes place. The rubber smoke smell was gone. The road was no longer a threat stage, just a normal highway in daylight trying to look innocent again. When we reached the first little town at 7:05 a.m., reality felt fully loaded again. Small shops opening, one gas station clerk standing outside stretching, a delivery van parked near a bakery, people out walking their dogs. I pulled over into a parking lot next to a closed coffee shack that was just opening. My hands still felt a tiny shake when I let go of the wheel. Not panic shake, the aftershock kind. The body remembers even when the road doesn't. We never reported it to anyone. There was no phone signal in that mountain pocket anyway, and even if there was, we were too stunned to want to relive it. The person vanished miles ahead, probably reached their own destination, maybe told nobody either. Maybe it was just a sleepy driver who woke up 1 second before turning 2 levs into headlines. Maybe it was a reminder that highways don't need ghosts to be scary. Sometimes silence and bad timing are enough. Eventually we drove out of the lot, continued the rest of the way home, the world now loud, human, normal still. When I got to my driveway, the moment didn't feel unreal anymore. It felt like one of those rare life scenes that burns itself into your memory without needing drama, without needing magic, without needing explanation. It was just speed, shock, bad luck, good reflex, and a valley that kept the secret like a professional. I sat in the car for a bit after parking. The stillness of my own driveway silence no longer scared me. It calmed me. Because now I knew the difference between safe silence and warning silence. And this one was finally safe. I was 16, maybe 17. Old enough to think I knew everything. Young enough to prove I didn't. We had borrowed my mom's 1998 Chevy Lumina, the kind of car every high school family seemed to own back then. 3 rows of seats even though it wasn't a van. Cloth interior that permanently smelled like someone spilled soda 5 years ago. The dashboard was cracked from summers that cooked the plastic like it was curing it for all time. The air vents only blew either ice cold or lukewarm. The radio antenna was bent, so every station came in half fuzzy, like you were always listening from underwater. The car was not fancy, it did not feel safe, but it was freedom on 4 tires, and we treated it like a spaceship. My friend Nate was in the passenger seat. My other friend Cole was slouched in the back left seat, leaning his shoulder against the window. I remember the texture of that glass under my palm when I braced myself for the turns. Cold, smooth, slightly sticky in places from years of fingers and humidity. We were out in a part of Illinois that didn't feel like a real place at night. Rural in the daytime is charming. Rural at night feels like the world ends at your headlights. Cornfields filled everything. You couldn't tell where the land dipped or rose, because corn grows tall and flat and hides the truth. The stalks were dry by the end of summer, leaves papery and brittle, whispering against each other when the wind pushed through. The road cut a perfect dark hallway between walls of green, black plants. Every few miles, a farmhouse stood back off the road, one porch light glowing like a lighthouse that didn't want visitors. Some houses were dark. Others had faint yard lamps that made the windows look like yellow rectangles floating in void. Grain silos showed up here and there, huge and quiet, metallic or concrete, looming like unfinished monuments. It was around 1:30 a.m. deep in the kind of late that feels like a secret. The sky was clear, stars sharp enough to look fake. Humidity hung low, so the air felt thick, but the breeze when we cracked the windows was cool. It smelled like dirt, growing plants, and a hint of manure from distant livestock. Cigarette smoke and weed clouded the car interior, swirling in the low glow orange of the instrument lights. I remember how the digital clock glowed in eerie green, the colon blinking between hours and minutes like a heartbeat. We had a half-empty bottle of warm, cheap whiskey rolling on the back seat floor. Beer cans rested in the footwells. A lighter rattled in the cup holder. The steering wheel felt damp under my hands from sweat and condensation. Every mile marker that flashed by was like a notch carved into memory. The road signs were reflective green, but the paint on the actual road lines was faded. I mostly steered by feel and the vague memory of curves coming from the drive out. There was no traffic, no distant taillights, no engine noise drifting up from towns. The only sound was our car tires humming on pavement that felt endless, mixed with the occasional thump from the whiskey bottle shifting when I adjusted speed. The engine had a low idle growl because Luminas always sounded slightly tired when they ran. Bugs hit the windshield at intervals, tiny ticking impacts spreading milky smears that the wipers only made worse. I remember hitting the washer fluid, the chemical smell blasting briefly through the vents, overly sweet and sharp. Then the lights came. At first it was a pulse, faint but too intense to be distant headlights. The rear view mirror should have only shown deep black. Instead, 2 huge white, blue suns bloomed behind us, expanding fast. Not flickering like emergency lights, not bouncing like high beams behind a hill, These lights moved with purpose. They swallowed distance in a way cars shouldn't. It felt like an animal pouncing. The mirror reflected so much brilliance that the inside of our car instantly turned silver, daytime bright. Shadows vanished. Everything was washed clean by sheer light. It was like someone poured lightning into the car and froze it in place. The glow was overpowering, so dense it felt solid. Every particle of smoke in the air lit up like dust in a projector beam. The seats bleached white. The ceiling fabric glowed, fibers visible like threads under a microscope. Even the leather keychains hanging from the ignition shimmered. I could see Nate's pupils pin, thin, tiny black dots fighting the glare. Cole's jaw hung open, sharp lines of his teeth glowing like he was cut out of paper. My own reflection in the mirror wasn't a face anymore, just an outline of shock-hugging bone. The light didn't arrive slowly. It didn't stalk up like a car gaining speed. It ambushed us. In 1 second there was nothing. In the next, blinding radiance. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it felt painful. The air in my lungs stopped moving. My whole body felt like it braced for impact. The fear wasn't soft or creeping. It was primal, sudden, stupid, human-animal fear that feels like instinct takes over your organs. My foot twitched off the gas, but the car didn't jerk because I had already been slowing in shock. The brightness made me feel naked, exposed, like we were insects on a glass slide and someone finally turned the lens toward us. I kept expecting noise, sirens, engines yelling, tires screeching. But there was none. The silence was worse because it made no sense. My brain kept trying to label the moment: cop car, high beams, search helicopter, some kind of truck. None of those ideas survived a full thought. The light had texture. Wait, it felt intentional, almost curious. The color temperature wasn't warm like halogen or amber like sodium road lamps. It was a cold, piercing white that edged into blue. Too pure, too clinical, too much like daylight but filtered through something alien in tone and purpose. It was like laboratory light, stadium light, arc weld light. All of those were wrong, but they were closer than cop lights. Then it vanished. Not gradually. Not fading to saved memory. It is snapped off like a breaker got thrown in the universe. The car interior dropped back into darkness instantly. The outside world closed again. No glow lingered. No headlights receded. No echo of brightness stuck to the cornfields. The windshield went back to black. The mirrors showed black. The stars stayed unbothered overhead. It felt like someone inhaled light out of the world and left us choking on the vacuum. My eyes burned from the sudden dark, disoriented. Spots seared into my retinas like spectral stains. My hearing rang from adrenaline, a high internal whine, even though nothing external had made sound. My pulse hammered in my throat, already ruined by the illness I was pretending I didn't have. I had been coughing earlier in the night, that dry, scratchy kind of cough that comes from smoke and sickness. Now the inside of my neck felt like sandpaper. Every breath stung, thin little blades rubbing soft tissue. The taste of beer and smoke metallic on my tongue. My hands floated millimeters above the wheel for a second before gripping again. The wheel felt real, grounding, damp but familiar. Nate exhaled once shaky, fogging the window before retreating back into motionless shock. Cole didn't even shift. The cornfields outside kept rustling faintly, leaves scraping against stalks like blind whispering grasshoppers. The road ahead twisted away into a curve I suddenly didn't trust. I slowed until we were maybe doing 40 in a 55. The speed felt reckless now. Cole scrubbed his palms on his jeans like he finally noticed they were sweating. The ashtray I had emptied before the trip already held fresh cigarette scars on its plastic lip. The digital clock blinked once in 38 a.m. I remember because I kept glancing at it like time might explain the impossible if I looked enough times. Nothing chased us afterward. No car erupted back into existence to claim the moment. No cop ever pulled us over that night. No trucks appeared. No helicopters hovered. Phones back then barely had signal out there anyway, but mine showed 0 bars when I checked later. The absence of explanation felt thick. The emptiness felt hostile. I kept driving, jaw aching, shoulder muscles clenched in a way that felt bruising by the end of it. The road hummed under tires again, but it now sounded like a warning instead of a companion. When we reached town around 20:10 a.m., the roadway finally passed streetlights and gas stations. The glow felt cheap and dirty and blessedly human. Nate lit one last cigarette, the flame tiny and comforting compared to what we had just lived through. Cole finally sat upright and rubbed his face like he was rebooting his sense of self. We parked behind the closed grocery store and killed the engine. The silence after turning off the car felt normal again. Empty, but not violent, just quiet. We sat there longer than we needed to, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30. The air outside smelled like asphalt cooling under night sky. My throat still hurt like hell. My head buzzed lightly from lingering smoke and alcohol and adrenaline. But the fear had shaped. Now we survived it. We lived through something huge, something we couldn't name, and nothing had killed us or arrested us or ruined us. The next day at school we were tired but intact. Years passed. We made jokes about it. People made jokes about it. The story shrank into legend. But the moment itself never shrank. Even now I can still feel that light inside a stupid old Chevy Lumina spilling over teenage mistakes in the middle of nowhere. I don't think about ghosts or monsters because those are easy stories. This one never found an easy home. 25 years later, I finally accepted the explanation I had ignored back then. What we saw was almost certainly a military aircraft doing low, alt maneuvers from a base not too far south, testing new lighting arrays. The kind that move faster than road traffic ever could. The kind that don't announce themselves. The kind that can swallow the world in one breath and disappear just as fast. Cole and Nate and I didn't encounter something unreal. We encountered a corner of the real world that was bigger than 3 scared high school kids had room for. We walked away from it with our nerves fried, our senses confused, and our lives unchanged except for one permanent scar of memory that never faded. No supernatural thing needed to happen for us to almost stop breathing that night. Sometimes reality alone delivers the shock. Sometimes the dark hides things that don't belong in teenage stories. Sometimes you get a glimpse, too bright to blink, and it stays with you forever because you lived long enough to remember it. And that, in the end, is the real fear. Not that the unknown visited, but that it left without giving a name, and we had to spend the rest of our lives growing old enough to finally understand it. I was small, curled up on the cold vinyl floorboard, but I didn't feel small in that moment. I felt weirdly awake for a kid who should have been half asleep. The kind of awake where you notice every tiny thing, even stuff you don't have words for yet. The car smelled like cigarette smoke, cold French fries, and my mom's floral perfume that always seemed too strong in tight spaces. It was a 1980s Ford LTD, the big kind with bench seats that felt more like a couch than a car seat. The seat cushions were split in places, yellow foam peeking through cracks like insulation. The back window was huge and flat, no tint, just clean glass smudged with fingerprints. Mine mostly. I remember pressing my palms on it earlier that night, leaving marks like proof I existed. The night outside was pitch black, the kind of black you only get in places with no street lights, no gas stations open past midnight, no nothing. We lived off a dirt road that turned to gravel, then to busted pavement, then to Highway 2031 eventually. But for long stretches it was just lonely asphalt with lines, painted down the middle that were more suggestion than rule. I remember watching those lines from the back seat, before she told me to lay down. They flashed under the car like a flickering movie when headlights hit them. It was calming almost, but that calm died fast. My mom was quiet from the moment she woke me up. She didn't usually get quiet. She had a voice built for calling dogs or kids across open yards. Loud, sharp, worn from years of stress and cigarettes. But that night she spoke low, like the air might snitch on her if she used her real volume. She didn't tell me much back then. I learned the truth later. My brother was older, way older, old enough to be a whole adult while I was still losing baby teeth. He was hurting. Bad. He had a gun. He was saying things he shouldn't have been saying. My mom did what she could. That's all I knew at 6 or 7. I didn't understand suicide. I understood guns only as loud noises and danger. I understood fear because I saw it on her face even when she tried to hide it. His house was far. Miles into trees down roads that looked like afterthoughts. Red clay ditches cut deep on both sides. Random mailboxes leaning like tired teeth in the ground. Names faded by rain. Pine trees stood close, crowded on the edges of clearings like they were eavesdropping. Kudzu vines tangled everything so thick you could mistake a rusted tractor for a hill. His driveway was long and sandy. The tires hissed more than rolled when we turned in. My mom parked under a big oak that looked older than the house itself. Spanish moss hung down like gray beards. The house had one yellow porch light buzzing with moths. The bulb flickered, dying. A storm had passed earlier that week and the air still felt wet even though the sky was dry. The humidity sat on your skin like sticky tape. She told me to stay in the car. Sit down low. Don't move. Don't make noise. She didn't say it sharp. She said it tight, like she was holding her breath between every few words. I watched the windshield the whole time she was gone. The house was just far enough that I could see shapes but not details. Shadows moved on the porch. My mom's outline. My brother's outline. Their gestures looked jagged even from a distance. I didn't hear words. I heard tone without sound. Body language gets loud when voices go silent. I saw him pacing. I saw her arms up once, like pleading. I saw the gun later only in memory, not in detail, because my brain filled it in when I got older and could imagine the entire picture. At the time it was just tension, like the air was pulled too tight, like a balloon about to pop. When she got back in the car, her door shut harder than normal. Not a slam, just firm like punctuation. We pulled out without waiting another second. Gravel spit behind us. The car leaned as we turned back onto the highway, suspension groaning. The engine sounded tired but willing. The roads were empty, no cars, no farm trucks, no late-night cruisers, just us, a rattling V8 and heavy night air. That's when the lights found us. At first they were distant, barely 2 dots. But there was something wrong even before they got close. They weren't the low, warm white glow of regular headlights. These were cooler, sharper, bluish at the center, with a glowing halo around them, like when you stare at a bulb too long, and it burns a circle into your vision. They felt high because they were high, farther above the road than truck lights normally sit. I remember thinking of 18-wheelers because that was the only thing I knew tall enough and heavy enough to hurt us that bad. But there was no rumble, no diesel growl, no horn echoing ahead of time, just light. Pure, fast, rising light. They came up on us like something launched, not driven. It went from far away to almost touching us in what felt like seconds, maybe less. My mom jerked her eyes around, rearview mirror trembling as she adjusted it again and again. Her pupils looked huge when the overhead glow hit the car. Not headlights. Something thicker, brighter. I'd never seen her move that fast, not even when she was late to work. Her foot pinned the gas pedal like she wanted it to break off the floorboard. The speedometer needle shook around 70-80, pushing past like she was daring it. The big Ford floated the faster it went. That boat feeling. No traction sound, just motion. Wind hissed around old door seals. Then she yelled at me without turning around. Lay down floor, head covered. Now, the yell wasn't angry. It was primal. Like the kind of yell before instinct, before manners, before everything. I dropped quick. But kids are dumb, curious creatures. I didn't cover my head. I flattened myself and twisted my neck so I could still see through the back glass. The floor mat was gritty under my cheek. Sand tracked in from the driveway earlier. I remember the seat springs buzzed softly above me from vibration. The lights kept climbing, but they didn't slow. That was the worst part. It wasn't like someone trying to pass carefully. It felt like something ignoring traffic laws, ignoring physics, ignoring us but also aiming directly at us at the same time. The glow filled the entire car interior until the vinyl seats looked pale beige instead of brown, until the dust in the air became sparkles, until my own skin looked like it had a white filter on it. Every grain of dirt on the floor, every small cup stain on the door panel, every crack in the seat upholstery stood visible like we were under a spotlight at a ball game. But silent. Too silent. The brightness didn't just hit us, it swallowed us. My mom kept accelerating for a heartbeat longer, then did something insane. She slammed the brakes, full lock. The brake pedal punched stiff because those old cars weren't smooth. It screeched. Finally noise, the tires screamed against asphalt. The car lurched. I hit my shoulder against the metal frame under the seat. The lights passed over us, but not like a car passing overhead on a bridge. There was no bridge. Nothing but air. It went over us like a force with lift, like it climbed and soared, like its beam was not just forward-facing but downward pouring, like a giant searchlight moving at highway speeds. The light ceiling above us didn't move smooth either. It rippled. Not like shattered light, but like thick light moving through dust or heat waves miles above fire ground. You ever see hot air shimmer above tar? Multiply that by 1,000 and remove color, remove sound, remove cause. We stopped dead in the middle of the road. No shoulder, no exit, just center of nowhere Alabama blacktop. My mom gripped the wheel so tight her knuckles looked bone-white under the glow. Outside the windows, the world was bleached bright like midday, but unnatural. Shadows were razor-crisp. Every blade of ditch grass, every tree trunk, every telephone wire overhead was etched in contrast like someone turned the sharpness to max. But none of it made a sound. Not even wind. Light screamed without voice. Then the silence went from absence to pressure. It felt like someone hit the mute button on the entire universe. No frogs, no bugs, whining, no night birds, no humidity buzz. Alabama summer nights are loud even when nothing big is happening. The woods have constant chatter. Locusts drone like electric lines. Crickets pulse steady like heartbeat metronomes. Frogs croak from muddy spots after rain. But not that road, not that night. It was sensory vacuum. The kind of quiet that makes your ears search for noise that isn't there yet. We sat there. Kid math makes time weird. But older math makes it even weirder because you realize it probably was only a minute or two. But a minute or two under existential dump truck headlights is longer than most people sit in their own minds in a lifetime. My heartbeat thumped against the floor. I could feel the blood pump in my temples. She didn't move. Didn't park. Didn't shift gears. Didn't talk. Just held the wheel like letting go might make reality tilt. The interior air got thick. Not smoky thick. Oxygen, thin thick. The kind of hot that steals breath. Because your lungs don't feel full anymore even though nothing is burning. The seat leather smelled like it was warming itself against the light blanket above. The air vents puffed weak heat because the engine was still spinning slow after the brake assault. It was humid but not moving. Humidity without motion is suffocation in its purest form. I crawled up enough to roll the window down with the manual crank. Kids don't think about danger when they're overheating. The window seal squeaked as it lowered. Fresh air should have rushed in. It didn't. Air stayed still like outside and inside were the same sealed box. The oak trees overhead looked lit from below like they had backlighting. It was confusing because nothing should have that kind of silhouette at night. But there it was. Then darkness dropped like a curtain. Boom, dark instant. No fade. No dimmer stepping. No cloud drift or truck taillights shrinking away. Just darkness slapped over everything at once like someone unplugged the sun. The halo was gone. The beam was gone. The etched shadows dissolved into thick black mush again. I sucked a full breath for the first time since it started. My lungs actually felt filled. My mom slowly pulled to the shoulder then, finally, as if motion was allowed again. The tires crunched mix of rusty gravel and broken asphalt bits. The road shoulder was narrow, overrun with weeds poking up through cracks in neglected dirt. The grass smelled earthy, warm summer sweet when it finally got inside. She put the car in park. The engine rattled itself into idle calm. I sat back up, air slowly moving through the window. I kept staring into that void where the lights had been, but there was nothing to stare at now. Just dark, no figure. No truck outline, no car retreating shape. Nothing parked ahead, nothing turning off, no heat hum rising away. Just absence. When I got older, I asked myself what it could have been. Not aliens, not spirits. Something explainable but almost not witnessed often enough to have a clean name. Maybe military flares from Fefty Rucker testing range drifting wrong direction through night haze. Maybe aircraft landing lights from a helicopter sprinting low across unpopulated zone to reach something urgent we never got news about. Maybe a big cargo plane descending too low on experimental pattern. Its lights set downward more than forward because of some weird equipment rig. Maybe some kind of search and rescue spotlight mounted on something airborne that shouldn't have been on that corridor, sweeping fast because something darker was happening miles away from us, not to us, but above us in a way that made our survival feel accidental. Light can look alive when it reflects with intention, even if intention belongs to a person we never see. The truth is, explanations don't always land. Not because they're wrong, but because seeing the truth doesn't mean it felt true in the moment. Reality can feel like fiction when it brushes too close. The ending finally came years later, when I realized the scariest part of that night wasn't the gun at my brother's house, or the lights roaring over us, or the silence that turned my lungs empty for a minute. It was the fact that sometimes your life gets spared by coincidence, while the bigger danger happens around you without your permission. We drove home after those lights vanished. Normal night sounds eventually returned as we hit roads closer to town. Frogs croaked again from wet ditches. Crickets pulsed from field grass. Locusts droned from far trees. The world unmuted itself slowly this time, sound by sound. The pressure in my ears dissolved. My mom exhaled fuller too. She never spoke about it. But we lived through it. Cleanly, clearly. And that clarity became the ending the moment life felt ordinary again. And I realized ordinary is sometimes the loudest gift you ever receive after something tries to blind you without ever caring to know your name. I was driving a 2-lane road that ran straight through my little country town one winter morning at 5 a.m. I always left the house early on radio days. The show started at 6, but I liked getting there before anyone else. The station was small, old, built in the 80s, with faded vinyl flooring, buzzing lights in the hallway, and that smell of cold electronics that never really warmed up until hours after sunrise. Hosting the morning radio show was the one thing in my life that made me feel alive, even if the rest of town was asleep while I did it. It was peak winter, the kind where the air bites the inside of your nose the second you step outside. My car was a 2011 sedan that had seen better days. The heater worked, but only if you drove at least a mile first. The seats were cracked leather, the steering wheel slightly sticky from age, the dashboard lit with that dim orange glow most older cars had. There was frost on every window when I got in. I scraped the windshield with one of those cheap plastic scrapers, my breath making clouds in front of my face, my gloves stiff from the cold. The town was quiet. No cars parked along Main Street, no lights in any houses except a few porch lamps glowing weak yellow far off the road. It felt like the whole valley was holding its breath. I pulled out of my driveway, tires crunching lightly over frozen gravel. The road ahead was flat for a bit, then snaked into a stretch that dipped down past the old grain mill on the left and a long line of bare oak trees on the right. The sky was still pitch black, no hint of blue yet. The moon was gone, hiding behind thick clouds. The streetlights along this part of town were spread way out, some burned out, some flickering, making patches of light that disappeared as soon as they showed up. The kind of lighting that made everything feel lonelier. I was doing 60 muff, same speed I always did. The road had a 55 limit, but everyone drove 60 through there. The asphalt was dark, worn, patched up here and there from years of trucks hauling through town. There was no snow falling yet, but the kind of cold that promised it. My windshield wipers squeaked once every couple minutes, sliding over leftover ice crystals even though I hadn't turned them on. My radio was off because I didn't want noise. I wanted focus. I wanted to run through my show notes in my head. I wanted to be on autopilot until caffeine, until sunrise, until the mic turned on. As I passed the old gas station, abandoned for years, with torn banners still tied to the sign frame, I felt the first real chill. Not from the weather, but that sudden feeling of being watched. The kind you don't question at first, because you assume it's just your brain filling in the dark with paranoia. The gas station windows were boarded up, graffiti frozen on the plywood like handwriting from a nightmare. The parking lot was cracked concrete glazed with frost. I kept my eyes on the road. Then it happened. I looked left for less than a second, less than a heartbeat, and there was a face, right next to me, pressed against the driver's side window glass, inches from mine, a pale face, washed out white, bluish almost like someone left in a freezer. Eyes wide open, focused directly ahead, not looking at me, not blinking. The skin was ghost pale, the lips slightly parted, strands of dark hair stuck flat to his forehead like they were damp. His cheekbone almost touched the glass. His breath fogged a tiny patch, like proof he was real, but it was so fast, so shocking that my brain refused to process logic. My reflex took over instantly. I yanked the wheel just a tiny bit to the right without thinking. The car jolted, tires skidding just slightly over the icy shoulder edge before gripping back. My heart slammed against my ribs like someone pounding a locked door. I sucked in a breath sharp enough to hurt. My hands tightened hard around the wheel. Then I whipped my head back to the left. Nothing. Just glass, dark trees, and black air rushing by. My rear view mirror showed nothing but an empty road swallowed in darkness. Pitch black, no shape, no movement. No person walking, standing, or running. No car coming up behind either. Just emptiness. My brain went into overdrive. Every worst explanation loaded itself at once. A ghost, a trick of the shadows, my sickness from lack of sleep. Some sleep paralysis while awake. An illusion from headlights that weren't even there. The winter chill made the whole thing feel supernatural, even though I'd told myself I didn't believe in anything like that. The roads were empty. Nobody should be there, let alone literally beside my window at 60 mph, skating along the glass like a nightmare passenger. My pulse buzzed in my ears louder than any radio static ever could. I felt sick, then dizzy, then cold again, like the face had stolen some of my temperature when it disappeared. I slowed the car to 45 mph without realizing I even did it. My foot felt slippery on the pedal. My breath was uneven. I had no idea how long I'd been holding it after seeing him. My headlights cut through white fog every now and then as I exhaled, but the fog outside never moved like normal morning mist. It clung to the ground too heavy, like it didn't want to leave the road. I forced myself to keep driving, even though every part of me wanted to pull over and scream into the empty air. I kept checking the mirrors every 10 seconds, waiting for something to chase me, to prove it wasn't imagination. Nothing did. The highway looked the same. A black road, icy shoulders, yellow dividing lines slightly faded, blurry from the cold glare of my headlights. The paint looked cracked, brittle, like bones wrapped in a road map. By the time I reached the radio station parking lot, my nerves were shredded. The station had a single big antenna behind the building, blinking a slow red light at the top, the only moving light in town at that hour. The building's exterior bricks looked darker when frozen deeper, like the cold aged them into something ancient. The parking lot was empty too. Not one car. No footprints in the frost. No sign a human had been there since yesterday afternoon. I parked fast, turned the engine off, then sat there gripping the wheel like it was keeping me from floating away into terror. The moment the silence hit, I felt like the face was back with me, sitting in the dead quiet. I shook my head, blinked a few times, then forced myself to open the car door. The cold slapped harder now that the heater was gone. My boots hit the icy pavement with a crunch that sounded way too loud for 5 a.m. Inside, the station was dark except for a couple hallway lights set on timers. I flipped the main switch in the studio and the lights came on with a soft electrical hum. The mic boom cast a long shadow across the desk. I dropped my coffee cup, picked it up, then placed it down again slower this time. My reflection in the dark monitor screen looked pale too, but alive, breathing, scared human. Still me. Even though I was warm inside, I couldn't shake the cold crawling under my thoughts. My brain kept looping the image like a stuck record. Pale face. Driver's side. Lips open. Breath fog on the window. Nobody on the road. Nothing behind me. Nothing beside me afterward. Just dark country town silence. I opened my laptop to check headlines. I needed grounding facts. Something real. Something that wasn't my brain inventing death against my windows. My fingers fumbled on the keyboard a bit. Then the local news page loaded, bright screen cutting into the dim studio. And there it was. An accident alert. A man had been hit by a truck on that same 2-lane highway stretch near the grain mill. The time was listed as 5:03 a.m. The location was exact. The spot was basically the same curve I'd just driven through a few minutes earlier. My stomach dropped in a slow, sick realization. I hadn't seen a ghost. I had seen a man. A real one. He hadn't been standing beside me. He had been running, fast enough that my brain saw him parallel to me for a microsecond. My headlights must have flashed across him at just the bleakest angle, catching his face as he threw himself toward the road. The next driver, a truck, hit him head on. It clicked. Everything. The blank stare forward, the lips open like mid-breath, the fog, the darkness behind me. Because he hadn't stopped running, he wasn't pacing the edge. He was committing to momentum, to impact, to ending a life before the sun could rise. I felt my legs go weak, not dramatic, just human. The kind of weak where your body quietly betrays you because it knows more than your brain does. I sat down in the studio chair, and the vinyl made a soft crackle from the cold still trapped in my jacket. I scrolled more. The article didn't sugarcoat anything. They never do with these small-town tragedies. The truck driver swerved but didn't have room. His vehicle was destroyed. The driver was physically alive, but mentally, emotionally, who knew? A moment like that could carve guilt into someone forever unless they were told the truth. That it was intentional, unstoppable, chosen by the person who died. I realized I had passed that spot at 5:00 a.m., maybe 2 or 3 minutes before it happened. The face wasn't haunting. It was a warning I accidentally intercepted inside a moment too dark, too early, too quiet for anyone to notice except me. If I'd left 30 seconds later, that sedan would have hit him instead. That guilt could have been mine. My tires could have skidded over a human body in the dark. My show voice could have cracked forever with knowing I carried someone's death in front of my headlights. I still went on air that morning. My voice sounded normal, steady even. Radio hosts learn early how to sound calm when everything inside is screaming. I hosted the show the way I always did. Slow breathing, warm tone, soft jokes, smooth transitions. But the whole time, in the back of my head, that face sat frozen against darkness. After the show, I filled out paperwork for a statement to the authorities, just in case it helped the other driver someday. I wanted someone to tell the truck driver that the man had chosen it, that nobody could have stopped it. That destiny there was shaped by grief, not by him. Weeks later, the road was patched again. No memorial, no sign. Small towns don't always know how to handle suicide grief publicly. The grain mill kept standing. The oaks stayed bare until spring. Cars drove over the same asphalt without feeling the cold I felt that morning. Years later, I still take that 2-lane road to the station, but now I turn the radio on early, fill the silence with voices, weather updates, music, anything human. Cold darkness is louder than quiet. Silence has weight when death has been near it. I survived that morning by luck I didn't earn. The truck driver survived physically, but may still carry the mental crash. The man who ran into winter darkness didn't want any of us to carry him, but we almost did anyway. The ending is this: the road is still there, long, winding, unchanged except by seasons. I kept the radio job, kept hosting morning shows. The town kept waking up every sunrise like nothing had happened, as towns do. But for me, winter mornings at 5 a.m. will always have a face in them. Not a ghost, not a legend, just the reminder of how close the real world can get without a sound. How fast a life can cross a road, how thin the glass is between forward motion and impact, how much luck sounds like nothing at all. I don't slow down anymore when I pass that spot, not because it isn't sad, but because I finally understand the truth of it. Some moments aren't there to be stopped. Some are only there to be witnessed. And I did witness it, in the smallest flash of headlights and human skin pressed against winter darkness.